Welcome to our next episode of the 5 Moments of Need Performance Matters series. This is Bob Mosher, one of the many co-hosts you'll meet throughout this series. So friends, are you trying to learn more about the 5 moments of need? Maybe how to design for them, implement for them, measure them, and even sell them as an approach to your enterprise. Well, in the Performance Matters series, we will help you better understand the theory and best practices behind this powerful methodology, and offer proven ways to put the 5 moments of need into practice. Okay, welcome back to yet another Performance Matters podcast. Bob Mosher here, one of your co-hosts. We are so honored that you have joined us. We're well into our 55th podcast now and honored and just passed our 40,000th download. So we are really excited and hope these are of value. By all means, comment, let us know, send us feedback. You know where we live. We would love to hear topics and ideas that you would love to hear in the future. Happy to host those conversations. And again, we are excited that you joined us. I am extremely excited for today's particular podcast because I get to spend time with a dear friend and one of my heroes in the space, a learning leader of great stature in our area, Mr. Doug Holt. It's great to have you here, Doug. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob. I'm really glad to be here. Excited to have this chat with you.
Us too, my friend. So I don't do the bio thing. I don't read them from any cue cards, that kind of deal, because it kind of helps us segue into the conversation. So why don't you start out, if you wouldn't mind, my friend, by level setting for our listeners about sort of your resume on your journey and roles you've been in as you've kind of gotten yourself into this L&D space. And a little bit on the organization, of course, you oversee.
So I have to say my journey in L&D can best be described as the thing I was doing until I figured out what I really wanted to do. I got introduced to the field as a student worker in the continuing education department in college. Wow. And then after I bombed my State Department foreign service interview just prior to graduation, I really needed a job and they needed somebody to fill a slot. So they hired me as a receptionist. So that was my start in learning. I was eventually promoted to a professional position specifically because, and I quote, "You don't know anything and we can train you to fit what we want." And I'm going to come back to this later because it occurred to me fairly recently that the world has come full circle in that regard. So I'll talk to that a little bit more later. I then spent several years moving about the higher ed community doing workforce development, and then eventually transitioned out of that world and jumped into the federal government realm. First with the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I ended as the Chief Learning Officer, and then over at CIGIE, or the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, overseeing their 3 training academies, and we provide training for the Inspector General community.
Pretty spectacular. Thank you for your service, my friend. It's been an honor to be a part of that journey since your DIA days. It was really been great to watch your work. So, friend, one of we've kind of been kindred spirits on this journey. We have our strong feelings about the direction of L&D and the work that, of course, you're doing right now and the good work with your team. Given an idea of the aha, this is all about performance, right? Performance matters. We bang the drum about this shift to performance first, shift away from training first, this kind of deal. What was your aha around this pivot that got you to think about this performance first approach in your work?
So I vividly remember this. It was at an ATD event and you were the presenter. So I sat down there, you started talking. This was maybe 8 or 9 years ago at this point. I don't know. It's been a while. Your comments that day really filled in the answers to major questions I was asking myself about the L&D profession as a whole. So for example, if training works, why doesn't it work? Why is it that we always must make a circumstantial case to demonstrate ROI, if I can use that term, instead of a direct evidence case? We could never do direct evidence case. So as you were sitting there going through your methodology and general thoughts about the L&D field, suddenly everything made sense. They were the answers to the questions I was asking myself. And I think I went up to you right after that and said, "Hi, I'm Doug, and I want you to come talk to us." That was it.
We did, and the journey began. So, friend, we've had this conversation over a beer or two over the years and conversations and lunch at your group. Why? And it's a personal frustration for me because I've been waving this banner for 10 plus years. To me, this is why we're called to do what we do. It's just so painfully apparent. Why do you think L&D has been so, and in some cases, I mean, just downright resistant? I mean, I've gotten hate mail, honestly, to make this pivot. Why do you think our industry finds this so hard to downright do this in the first place?
Well, I think there are a number of factors that come into play, and I'll list a few of them. I'm sure there are more. First one is we're shaped by our experiences, and our collective experience as learners is in the K through 12 or K through college model, or slight variations thereof. It's what we know. And you can look at most of what happens and see, yep, that's the K through 12 model, really, after you kind of filter through the jazziness that might have been applied. And one of the things that I used to do at DIA when I was trying to make the point that we need to do things differently is I looked up an image of learning in the Middle Ages. And really, I don't know if the image truly had anything to do with learning or how they really did it, but it was a guy standing at a lectern talking to rows of people who were just kind of passed out in the pews or whatever it was, or in the rows, listening to him teach because they were so bored. And so I put that in my presentations and I said, "You see much difference between this and what we do today?" And of course the answer is no. It's largely the same. In my mind, we've been doing the same thing the same way since the Middle Ages. So that's some pretty significant shaping. That would be number one. Number two, in my experience, most people enter the learning field as a collateral duty to fill some kind of role that they don't know much about. That's how I got into it. Exactly. They learn what to do from those who preceded them, who learned from the people before them, and so on and so forth. It's sort of a hand me down. Here's what I know, and I'm going to teach you what I know. There's no right way to do L&D. There's just lots of flavors of the month that we encounter, and people run to this one or that one, but there's no sort of central standards that people tie to, or body of research that people know about, or whatever. I mean, it's just kind of we're winging it. Number three, this is a big one: administrative convenience. It is very much easier to do Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I can just bring you in, do the thing, turn you loose, you go back to work the next week, as opposed to I have to figure out a way to chunk your learning, to bring you in for a couple hours here, a couple hours there, maybe mix some virtual kind of things. And, it's really hard to do. And so we default to the thing that we know, and that is pretty easy to do. And then I think practical reality also really does work against us in a lot of ways. And it's often hard for learners themselves to engage in ways that research might tell us they learn best. And I've experienced that for myself. And we've had some conversations about this very thing this year, you and I, about my challenges in breaking away from work for an hour or two to participate in a certain event. And come back the next week or 2 weeks from them and just kind of pick up the thread. As a practical matter, it can be very difficult to do that. So I think that really gets in our way as well. So it's that combination of things and others, but it's a pretty steep hill to be pushing the rock up that we are pushing.
Well, I think that plays perfectly into my next question, is that you have made the pivot. I've admired and watched your team since the DIA days, and then as you came over to CIGIE. I always am very careful to position any learning leader that I've seen take this journey as what I call a courageous one, because it is not the path most traveled. To your point, all the four things you just went over. But what I admire about you and others we've had in this podcast is you still damn the torpedoes. I'm doing it. I always say this is not a journey for the faint at heart. So those listening who are going to make this pivot, what challenges lie ahead for those learning leaders and their teams who want to embark on this?
A really wonderful former colleague of mine, Russ Spalding, who you also know.
Love Russ.
He used to have this great quote, and he said he would come to me and say, "Doug, a prophet is always hated in his own land." And so we'd be trying to do all kinds of things internally, and externally people are saying, "Oh, wow, that's so great. Can you show us what you're doing?" And meanwhile, we can't get the time of day internally. You have to understand that you are the outlier. You are the heretic. You're the different one, and you have to get comfortable with that.
Truly. I love that. Yeah.
Second item would be resistance, and that would be from within your own team, that they may not be comfortable with it. They may not understand it. You're going to get some resistance from your team, and it's not personal. It just is different. Some people within the team will gravitate right to it. Others will not. Some will be in the middle, but you got to be okay with that and work with people over time, kind of meet them where they are and kind of grow together until you get to a point where everything's working. Third item, unlearning and relearning. And this I mentioned up front that I was originally hired because I didn't know anything. And I found myself saying the other day, from here on out, I'm only hiring people who don't have a clue about anything to do with learning so that we can work with them. It's much easier to work with a blank slate. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have become the person that hired me, kind of thing. And it's interesting too. I kind of reflected on, they were hiring me to do traditional things, maybe in non-traditional ways, but still traditional things.
Yeah.
And the struggle previously, or the struggle that they were fighting against, was applying traditional learning in non-traditional formats, but it was still traditional. So it was delivering on-site learning to business and industry. Well, we're a university, we don't do that, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And being kind of a sales representative. Now it's really, for me, it's fundamentally shifting our entire approach to learning, design, and delivery, and even our concept of what that is.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to work with people who are starting from knowing nothing than it is to start from a base of people who have really worked in this field for a long time and have deeply ingrained beliefs, or are simply just accustomed to doing it this way, even though they may try as hard as they can. There's just a little bit more struggle, and those people who struggle have value too. We want to bring them along. I'm just saying, at this point, I'm thinking, boy, it would be easier if they didn't know anything. There's that. I got a couple more here. Maintaining strategic patience. That is probably the hardest. I mean, this is a list of hard, but that's among the hardest, because you run into so many delays and roadblocks and frustrations, and why can't we go faster? We need more time to do this right, than kind of do it on the side. We need more and different people to do it. So it's just maintaining a view of the North Star, that is where you want to go, to help push you through the frustrations or not having enough people or whatever it happens to be. Another one, and this is a big one, when to involve which staff. So this is one of those things where you want to involve everybody up front. But the practical reality is you can't. You have to work with a smaller team. And so then you have those folks who are in and those folks are out, and managing the relationships becomes very challenging. And then when do you bring them in? There's a point where you have to expand the circle. But when and how, and have you burned bridges by that point that, they don't want to be in your circle anymore because you didn't let them in at the beginning. And then the last thing, I've said this a lot too. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen the flaws of the traditional and the goodness of the new, it's just going to drive you. I mean, it's the thing that gets under your skin. So if you're not prepared to have something under your skin that's pushing you forward every day and making you crazy that you haven't fixed it yet, don't get into it, because it will do that. Absolutely.
It's interesting. My first time I watched Con do this, Doug, I was a starched ISD. We brought him into the company I worked for at the time, and I watched him do the 5 moments and a first RWA. And I was in the back of the room. It was the most disturbing professional day of my life, because every ounce of my being was fighting what I was seeing. And I left that room, and I had a rough evening. And I wasn't necessarily in there to adopt it, frankly. This was very, very early in my journey. And troubled me the most was I couldn't help but look back at all the courses I'd written, all the e-learning I designed, and go, how do I do that like that again? After I watched what he masterfully uncovered in that first day with Smeeze in the room. And it became so apparent the misses I had because of seeing him do it. You hinted at it, friend, I think in your last conversation there. What drives you then? This is a mountain to climb, right? So what's the upside to your team, the organization you support? What is driving you to stay in the fight?
First, I think I need to acknowledge that this is not a universal truth in our organization, that we have completely made the shift across all of our career fields. We really have one that we're pretty far along in, others that we haven't started in, and others that we're kind of in the middle. So what I'm going to focus on here is in the one that's pretty far along, because it is the example of what we want to do and what we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regard, I'd say that the key stakeholders really love what we're doing. They bought in, they talk about it, they compliment us in front of their peers who are other leaders in the community. So we do get that feedback. Learners are asking for more things like it. Why can't everything be like this thing? On the performance support side, we get a lot of questions about expanding access to our performance support tool. And that's been a bit of a challenge because it's a small group. And as soon as you scale, you got to deal with scale. And we're still trying to figure out good ways to manage that. But at the end of the day, they see what their neighbor has and they want it. We also, from our team's perspective, I think our team is finding meaning in their work. They're finding it interesting, they're finding it impactful, and they're applying it to different parts of their work life and even their personal life. What's the context for this thing that I'm involved in, and how can I organize it in a way that's intuitive and easy to find, and those sorts of things. There's also the element that we're not just delivering a course, we're enabling performance. That enabling performance is inspiring, particularly when you remove the idea that I was brought up with as a young learning professional, that transfer is the supervisor's job back at the ranch when we send them out. Our job is done when we send them away from our learning experience. If you're enabling performance, your job does not end when they leave. In fact, it's just beginning when they leave. And you should have done a lot before they even got there. And that's on you. Once you accept that that's my responsibility, it's not the supervisor's responsibility, your frame of reference, your worldview changes, and you've got a bigger job, but a lot cooler job than you had before.
Love it. Yep. So friend, you mentioned this a little bit in there about the scaling thing and the navigator, which is spectacular, and all the hard work you've done around that. Technology is all the buzz, LMS, LXP, LCMS. I mean, my gosh, all this stuff. But at the same time, I don't mean to be bashing, because it is an enabler. We live in an era where learning technologies, digital stuff is like we've never, ever had before. Can you talk a little bit about the technology in this workflow, performance support stuff? What's the benefit downstream, and what's been your journey in trying to get your arms around that?
Sure. Well, the biggest thing really is how much do you need and when. So there are various platforms that you can invest in. They're large and small. And the question is, what are we trying to do with that platform, and how much can we maintain? How much can we afford? Those sorts of things. And then again, when do we scale? When do we expand it? So how much do you need and when? Because that'll change. Initially, when nobody knows what you're doing, you're going to have 5 or 10 people hitting that performance support platform. As you grow and scale, you're going to have a lot more. And so you get much more into managing the accesses and all those sorts of things. So how much do you need and when is a big one. Access to the platform itself is something that we've been talking about more recently. And so right now, here you can access the performance support platform on your laptop or on your phone or things like that. But do we need an app? Something like that. We've had a couple conversations with our learners, and it comes back to, well, first I got to know about it, and second, it's got to be really easy for me to access, because I might not be at my desk, and I might not want to look it up on my cell phone. But maybe if we have an app or something like that, we can deal with that. So I don't know where we're going to go with that, but we're struggling with that one right now. Keeping the contents of whatever it is you're doing up to date is a major challenge.
Currency
that we're grappling with. And then I mentioned earlier, scaling, how and when are you going to do that? Those are really my big 4.
Yeah. What's been exciting about what we've done, and I've seen you do too, I think there's a maturity here. And so in organizations that doesn't have anything, something's great. One of our dear colleagues, Carol Stroud in our organization talks about, taking a hospital through this journey that ultimately bought a sledgehammer in this domain, but started with linked PDFs because they didn't have anything else besides that when they started, except a mess of stuff. Your point about crawl, walk, run is big. So let's do this. If you got to get started, again, many people who listen, we get this feedback all the time. They so appreciate the stories. At the same time, to many of them, this seems like crossing the Grand Canyon, right? If they're out there listening, how do you dip your toe in this thing so that you start that pivot you started with earlier and you get on this climb?
So the first thing I would do is find an intellectually curious go-getter on your staff to help out or more. And really both at DIA and where I am now, I got lucky and found people who clicked with the ideas right away and just started running hard, and who now are more of an expert than I ever could hope to be, as much as I'm in it. Second would be find the most underserved group in your organization to partner with. That would be somebody who is so desperate for attention and resources in the learning realm that they will suffer through all of your mistakes and they will work with you, when you want to pull together a group for a rapid workflow analysis or some kind of validation. They will send their best and brightest, and they'll sit there and they'll do it with you, and they'll take on jobs that you would have to do yourself otherwise. So that would be the second thing. And then the third big thing, and it took me a long time to really get this, the third thing is do something. I spent a lot of time talking about this and nobody gets it. But as soon as we did something, as soon as you have something to show,
yep,
everybody gets it. So do something, because nobody gets it until they can see it. Doesn't matter what it is, do something. Don't talk about it.
Perfect. Well, hey, my friend, it's an honor to have you as a friend and a colleague. It's been great to watch your journey. I so appreciate you've always been so willing to share good, bad, and ugly of what you've been through. So appreciate your candor and directness about the whole thing, because I think I'm not begin to say the pandemic is something you'd wish on anyone, but my dad always said there's good things in everything. And as L&D professionals, the need for us to support performance is like in my 39 years, I've never seen before. And I think there's an opening for leaders like you and programs like this to be allowed, if we take the plunge, to do things very different. And it's so badly needed. So I thank you for your courage, your leadership, and your willingness to share. As always, it's been great having you on.
Well, thanks, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to shout from the rooftops every day, we're doing it wrong. We need to do it better and different, and come on along, join the party. And really, more are joining the party. I just had that conversation today with somebody, and I said, the choir is small, but the choir is bigger than it used to be. It's growing.
It is, my friend. Thank you. This helps. Appreciate it. You well, be safe. Thanks, buddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that's it for this episode of the 5 Moments of Need Performance Matters series. We look forward to future conversations around how to best put the 5 moments of need into practice. We welcome your feedback and can be reached on Twitter using my Twitter handle at BMOSH, as well as our 5 Moments of Need website, which is www.5momentsofneed.com. We hope you're finding these helpful and will subscribe to future episodes. Have a great day, friends.